What is up, you guys? It's Monty, and today I'm back again once again with the start of another video. Today I am doing the long await. I don't actually know if it's long awaited. It feels long awakened to me. Also, we're gonna ignore the fact that I just got out of the shower. We're just gonna ignore that. But I'm here today to tier rank the 9 books that Aaron from Booked and Busy asked me to read in the months of July and August. Originally, I was going to vlog this experience. I was going to pull a leaf out of Kayla's book because at the time, I had just finished watching her. I only update the vlog when I have nice things to say. And then I started reading the books and and it quickly became apparent that I didn't have a lot of nice things to say. So I scrapped the vlog idea. I reacted to Aaron sending me the list, and that's up on my Patreon for the patrons. So for as little as $3, you can go watch that and subscribe if you don't want to keep doing it. But it's over there if you want to see Aaron presenting me, trying to pitch me these books. So that's where that is. But today I'm about to jump over into the little tier maker situation. We're gonna discuss. This could still be a long video. I don't know, because I didn't really give in-depth reviews of these. I did the first 3 books in July, and I have not filmed my August wrap-up yet. So for 6 of these books, well, I guess all 9, you'll finally get like my full in-depth thoughts and opinions if if you're not a reading sprint girly. Because I have talked about every single one of these books at some point on a reading sprint, I'm fairly certain. So I'm gonna shut up now. I'm gonna hand it off to future Monty. He's gonna tier rank, and then that'll be the video. Okay, so I'm here to tier rank. I have these listed in the order that I read them in. Let me just make sure I have my mouse. Okay, so I have them in the order that I read them. So I started with Wall of Storms, and I ended on the 31st of August with Pachinko. So over here is how we're gonna rank them. So she did what needed to be done. Typically, if this was like a perfect world and I was like tier ranking, I do want to do another tier ranking video. I want to tier rank all of the 2022 releases that I've read, because I've read an absurd number of them. I'm currently sitting at, I think it's 98 books. There are 2 books I haven't added to my Goodreads at this time. I've read like 98, and I've read something like 50 or 60 2022 releases. It's an absurdly lopsided figure. But she did what needed to be done. Typically would be a 5-star read. It would be a book that, the author did what needed to be done. They hit everything out of the park. The writing, the characters, the quotables, everything they look for in a book happened here over, and she did what needed to be done. She's cute. Typically it'd be like a 4-star read, like it was okay. It did what, she tied, it was fine. I have some complaints, but nothing spectacular is wrong with it. Meh typically would be a book that, it's just middle of the road. Very, very ever, it is what it is. Y'all are liars. So these are books that y'all told me were going to be good and then weren't. Like, they were not good books. I'm sorry, y'all lied. Like, the truth wasn't there, wasn't present, did not attend the meeting. The Bars in Fucking Hell are books that I hate, didn't like, there's not a redeeming quality to be found here. So this is how I'm going to be tier ranking. If I ever do that 2022, I'll probably use these same little categories, best to worst. Now, for this particular tier ranking, I'm not going to do everything that I've read in the year of 2022. I'm going to look at these 9 books as these 9 books. I'm going to give you my thoughts, my opinions, my review, but I'm not going to be like, I've read outside of these 9 books. Like, I'm going to attempt to do this as though these are the only 9 books that I've ever read, with the exception of our first book here, Wall of Storms. So, Wall of Storms by Ken Liu is the 2nd book in the Dandelion Dynasty, but I also feel like this book serves as a book 1. So, maybe it was also like May or April, I read the first book. What is that book? The Grace of Kings by Ken Liu. I read it for my patrons. It was their Patreon exclusive reading vlog. So I read The Blade Itself by Joe Abercrombie, and I read The Grace of Kings. in that reading vlog, I said that Grace the Kings is probably delivering the most on like the grimdark aspects of like a grimdark story that I was, looking for. There's a lot of character death that happens in the Grace of Kings. People are beheaded, people are like gutted, like some sad shit happens. But the Grace of Kings is a story of revolution and the founding of a dynasty, essentially. And I've heard it since being referred to as a prequel, which I think is a little bit ridiculous. But since Samantha Shannon is coming out with A Day of Fallen Night, and that's another 800-page, prequel allegedly, I guess Ken Liu writing a 600-page prequel is fine. Wall of Storms, I think, really, there's a time jump. So we're in a future. We have, moved past the revolutionary phase, and this kingdom, this, country is now facing other logistical problems. It's facing who was going to inherit the throne problems, and it's facing an existential threat from outside the kingdom that is looking to invade them. I also feel that Wall of Storms introduces the actual like fantastical elements of the story. There's a lot of like science, and I've heard people say that you have to like really be invested in fantasy science to really enjoy the story. And I do think that you can definitely see the thought of Ken Liu explaining things to you, and he definitely goes into the minutia of how some of these advancements are made and how they impact the society that we're following. But ultimately, I think, and I've said this in many a live stream, I do think that if you do want to read the Dandelion Dynasty, I say you start with the Wall of Storms. And I say this not because the first book is bad, but I think that the story that Ken Liu is actually telling starts in the Wall of Storms. And I've heard the third book, which was originally supposed to be the last book, doesn't really have like a super strong ending. And so I think that if you start with the Wall of Storms and then you read The Veiled Throne, it'll give you that typical second book feeling. I think the second book feeling coming with The Veiled Throne. So when you go to the Speaking Bones, you'll be really excited. And then once you've had that entire trilogy, essentially, you can go back to The Grace of Kings and it'll feel like you get to really enrich yourselves in the story. I think that if you go from The Grace of Kings right into the Wall of Storms, I do think that there is a little bit of a tone. It's just it doesn't work all the way. A lot of people don't like The Grace of Kings because of the female characters. There's like only one female character in that book, and it's like Gia and a throwaway wife. I think there's like a throwaway wife, or like a throwaway mistress or something. There's very few, and you don't only spend a lot of time with them, and they don't impact the story the way that they do in the Wall of Storms. The Wall of Storms offers you up there's Gia who is returning. You have a princess, I forget her name, but she was actually my favorite character in the book, the princess character. And then the princess has this advisor character who's also a woman and has some mobility issues. Those three characters made the Wall of Storms interesting to read about because Gia is the only one who is actively doing anything. She's trying to secure her place in, the society that they find themselves in. And so I think that the Wall of Storms is fine. I'm going to put it Y'all Are in Liars because I've heard that the Wall of Storms is everybody's favorite book. And I just don't see it. I really kind of want to put it in the Bars in fucking Hell. But I'm going to put it in Y'all Are Liars because y'all hype this up. It's not a bad book, but it's just not a good book. And I think that if I had known to start in the Wall of Storms, I might have appreciated the Dandelion Dynasty more. And I might be excited to continue on with what Ken Liu was doing. But ultimately, I don't think that this is a series that is for me. And I do think that this is for a very specific audience that reads adult fantasy. Next, we have Akwaeke Emezi's debut contemporary romance novel that I would argue is more literary, and that is You Made a Fool of Death with Your Beauty. I'm gonna put it straight in Y'all Are Liars. Like, y'all, actually, no, I'm actually not. The bar is in fucking hell with this book. Here's the thing. I think that this could have been an interesting literary book, but I think that Akwaeke Emezi running around the Twitter streets proclaiming that they wrote a romance feels like a lie. So in this book, we're following our main character, Faye, who is like 25, maybe 27. She's living her best life in New York City. Her husband has recently, I don't know if it's actually recently, but her husband has passed away. And when we meet her, we see her trying to move on with her life a little bit, kind of get back out there. So we meet her and she's at this party and she decides she's going to have sex with a stranger in this bathroom. And people describe this as messy. This book is just raggedy. Then the book swifts. It turns into like this romance between Faye and Nasir, who is like a homie of the man in the bathroom, which is why people call this a messy book, because she's a homie hopper. okay, congratulations. I think you can be a homie hopper, live your best life. Like this is a person who was married very young and is now having to deal with the trauma of losing the spouse at a young age. So Nasir convinces Faye to come back to the island. I don't know what, I think they're going to Jamaica, but maybe that's just me being Caribphobic or something. I don't know where they're fucking going in the Caribbean, but they go back to the Caribbean to go on this little vacation. And Faye eventually, spoiler alert, decides that she is going to homie hop from Nasir to Nasir's daddy because Nasir has to go on a business trip. And so Faye is left alone in the house with the dad. And the dad and her are bonding over both of them having lost a spouse. This is where the book kind of loses me a little bit because I don't think that by the point in the narrative where Faye and the dad get together, there's enough of the book left to do the story. I think that you can switch love interests as many times as you want, but I do think that if you're going to do that, I think that you have to do it in a way that is, I don't want to say believable, but you have to do something. These characters talk like one time about having lost their spouse, and then all of a sudden they're madly in love. And do I think that you can bond over being a grief stricken individual? Of course you can bond over being a person who is experiencing grief and is trying to maneuver that and is doing the best with what they can. But Faye and his dad character were just raggedy. They were it just didn't hit the way that I think Okweke Emeze thought that it was serving, and the way that y'all think it's serving, because everyone I know is giving this book 5 out of 5 stars, maybe a 4.5 from some people, but this is pretty regularly loved in the bookist community, and I just didn't think that there was enough time for the characters to make the switch. And then in order to really sell the story, here's the thing. Do I think that, so in the third act, Nasir gets enraged that Faye and his dad are sleeping together and have decided that they want to be a couple. And this is another part where the story kind of lost me. It's like, do I think that men act the way that Nasir acted in that scene? Yes. Had Nasir been acting a little suspect before then? Yes. But it was just to such an extreme that it felt like a Tyler Perry production. It felt very over the top. It felt a little dramatic for dramatic's sake, and not in like a fun, messy, nuanced way. It was raggedy. And this is coupled with the fact that the entire narrative, I feel like Okweke Emezi was trying to make Faye this unlikable female protagonist, but at the same time, like, she was trying to make her this unlikable female protagonist while simultaneously making Faye more like her best friend Joy, because Joy is the only good character in this book. Joy and Faye have been friends for a really long time. Joy is the person who was like really happy that Faye is getting back out there, who is trying to live her life, who is embracing, being a young person, even though she is going through all of this trauma. But Joy is also presented in the narrative as this very unserious person who is constantly finding relationships with women that cannot return her affection. We know that she is dating like this married professor. She often goes after women who are still in the closet. Like, she is like constantly setting herself up for failure, and that's presented as like being a negative thing about Joy, and it's something that Faye does not like about Joy. But as the narrative goes on, Faye is doing more and more things that just don't make sense for her. Like, she's going after this older man who is emotionally not really available, who is it's a very unserious relationship. And so then in the third act, we have Nasir, who is like trying to throw Faye out of the house, who was calling her all kinds of sluts and whores and bitches and cunts. And it's just like, you're doing this so like we hate him, but like I was like, the narrative also never really made you invested in him. So like this complete, like, he's a deranged man who is attacking Faye, just it feels like it comes out of nowhere and it's not necessary, when the real issue for me was always that Nasir's father, we know that his wife died a long time ago. Then we know that 5 years before the start of the story, he was dating this man, and his children were full ass adults from what I remember when he was dating this man, and his children were like, yeah, we don't like that you're a bisexual man. And so they made him break up with him. But now Nasir's father is like, oh, I lost my wife, I lost this man, so fuck my kids. And like, I do think that at a certain point you have to, I do think that it's not entirely unrealistic for a parent to be like, fuck my kids, especially when your children are whole ass adults who are being weird about you being in a relationship. But I do think that there is also a time and place and a way to go about introducing your adult children to the fact that you're dating. And I don't know if the time and place to go about it is when your son brings home a girl and you decide to, like, you know what I mean? Like, I think that there's a lot more texture and nuance in this book than the book really wanted to present. And then we bring in the man from the bathroom in the third act, and he's like, yeah, Nasir has always been going off his rocker. And then the book ends, and Faye and this older man are engaged despite the fact that they've known each other for like 3 seconds. So the book itself is entirely too unserious for me, and it's being presented as something that it's really not. And I think if the book just sold itself on being uh my boyfriend's dad romance, like there's very clearly an audience for that. I'm just not that audience. And so You Made a Fool of Death with Your Beauty, The Bars in Fucking Hell, the book is bad. Right next to Y'all Are Liar, this is another one that is like really in the middle. Kai K. I'm gonna put it here because Kai K is it's pitched as on BookTube. It's being as told in the Madeline Miller School of Writing, where we're gonna take a character from mythology who is oftentimes seen as a villain, and we're going to we're gonna rehabilitate her. I have over the years in reading a lot of these like villain rehabilitation stories or like these misunderstood women stories, I find that the way that a lot of authors choose to go about it is making the female character that has been, villainized or whatever into like a really naive character. And I felt like Kaikehe was a very naive person, and I don't think that Kaikehe actually made any choices in this book. So from my understanding, Kaikeyi is a character in this Indian epic myth, and she is often portrayed as sending one of her sons like into banishment because she was jealous of him because she wanted to be queen, but the people like didn't like her. And what the story does is it crafts this woman who is entirely naive, who for her and she like her entire life, like her little handmaiden is like the person who is like really the driving force behind like 98 of the decisions she makes as a grown woman. And it never felt that Kaike was actually given the agency or that I felt that the narrative was supposed to be addressing here. Like I went in with the complete misunderstanding of what was supposed to be happening here, but I felt that the narrative was being written, like the story that Vaishnavi Patel was trying to tell was only being written to give Kake her agency back. And I felt that at every turn in the narrative, when a decision had to be made, Kake was not the person making that decision. I also felt that the manipulation magic was a little bit foolish at times, and how it was being presented and how it played out, and it just was not a good time. Like I know that people really loved Kai K, and I know that it's like super beloved, but I don't understand how, I don't understand why, and there really isn't a whole lot of people on this planet that I would recommend Kai K to. Obviously I'm in the minority here, but this like trio of books just really was not a good time for me. And so all three of the first books that I read for this were kind of a flop. Like I was not enjoying any of my time. I gave all of them 1 star for one reason or another. And I just didn't like it. Then I picked up Zodiac Academy. This is where we get into the autumn books. So the first book I picked up this August was Zodiac Academy by Carolyn Peckham and Suzanne Valenti. I also gave this book 1 star. So again, I'm not saying that this is a better book than these three. I think these three all occupy sort of like the same wave in my brain. But for Zodiac Academy, I'm gonna put it in meh, because I think that this book is a book that already exists. When I was reading it on my live sprints, I said that it reminded me of the House of Night books by PC and Kirsten, or is it Kirsten? Whatever that girl's name is, cast, like the cast, mother-daughter duo. This is what it's giving. I feel like it's just, but this is also weird because I think that it's written in a way that 7th graders could understand, but I understand that the actual content of the book is written for a mature audience. Like there are some sex scenes in this first book, and there is some power imbalances that it's there, but the way that the names are like punny, and the way that like nothing is described, and like just the general thought processes, it was giving me House of Night. It was also feels like it occupies a similar space as the first Crave book, and y'all know I really like Crush and Crave, and tween Monty back in the day, he was really eaten up in House of Night books. And so Zodiac Academy to me just feels like a riff on more of that. And I don't see that this first book really elevates it for its adult audience. Like, even if you really like, paranormal romances that are like a little bully moment, I do think that, like, even like the Zodiac Academy, like, I don't think this book makes a name for itself to exist. But if in the age of, book talk and Gen Z people finding their moment, I do think that it makes sense that Zodiac Academy would be their House of Night, their Crush and Crave. So, like, I get it, like, I understand the appeal, but for like serious adult audiences, like, whatever. Like, I think that this book feels like a dime a dozen, and so, like, this book blowing up is kind of confusing. I also feel like, again, like, it's not written all that well, it's not written that great. So yeah, this is what it is. Then we have Cleopatra and Frankenstein by Coco Malors. I just read this in my most recent weekly reading vlog. The bar's in fucking hell. This book is bad. At the beginning, they had me in the first half. Not gonna lie. Not actually, you know what? Just because of that, I'll put it up here with Wall of Storms. But again, it was still a bad book. Still gave it like 1 or 2 stars. Can't remember off the top of my head. The beginning of this book had me. So we're following Cleo and Frank, who meet in an elevator, and they have what seems to be this whirlwind romance. Cleo is from the UK, so she needs a visa, but they are at the beginning of the book and throughout the book, they present their marriage as not being for that visa. Like, Cleo really wants the girlies to believe that she like married this man because she loves him. And the book really plays with how Cleo and Frank's relationship impacted their circle of friends, both their close circle and the people more on the periphery. It just wasn't good. I didn't think that the book had a whole lot to say. I don't think there was a lot of substance there. There was a lot of things that happened, I think, just for the shock value of them happening, and not because they really played with the characters in meaningful ways, not because they were interesting. They just something needed to happen, and so shocking things would happen, and then we'd move on to the more mundane thing. Kenya from Lily Reads was talking about this, and they're reading like an internet intellectual. It's like this very similar situation, and it makes sense because Cleo and Frank over here is another one of these bookish internet intellectual books. It's another one of the lit fit girlies, their hot book of the summer. And it wasn't serving. It didn't serve anything, plot, characters, quotables. Just was an all around bad time. The only book that I thoroughly enjoyed, that she did what needed to be done, The Portrait of a Mirror. The Portrait of a Mirror by A. Natasha Tchaikovsky. I gave this book 4 stars. It's really 4.5 stars. We are following these two couples, 2 people from New York, 2 people from Philadelphia. Their lives intersect and intertwine. We understand that some of these people have already known each other. They have a history together. We are seeing this history play out. We are seeing their lives mix and mingle. And even here, we're seeing how their mixing and mingling impacts the people in their periphery and their lives. But The Portrait of a Mirror did what needed to be done. I feel like Cleopatra and Frankenstein was trying to say a lot. It was trying to do a lot of just, quite frankly, weird things. There were several moments in this book that just felt like just very violently racist. There's Zoe, who was a half black sister in the story. There's like some Asian characters. There were some moments in this book just felt violently racist to me. The Portrait of a Mirror, if that happened, didn't pick up on it. It was a good time all around. This is a messy book. This is a messy book. This is a raggedy book, but this, high art. The characters were there, the writing was there. There is a level of pretension. I said this in the weekly reading vlog. There's a level of pretension in Portrait of a Mirror that I feel is like lacking from some of the lit fit girlies these days. Some of the lit fit girlies are writing literary fiction, but they have nothing to say. They have nothing to say. They're attempting to skewer, they are attempting social critique, they are attempting societal commentary. And I think that while in literary fiction you can get away with these like really raggedy cutouts of characters, because at the end of the day it's not so much about the characters, it's about your message, it's about what you're trying to say, it's about the commentary. But so often, like, even that's not coming through. But here it was coming through. Everything was happening. The characters, the quotables, the commentary, it was happening. It was here, and I all around loved it. I think that Great Circle by Maggie Shipstead has to be one of the wildest books I've ever read. I'm going to put it this is another, like, all of these books right here. Um, Zodiac Academy being in Met is really just me because there's nothing to say because it's a book that's a dime a dozen. But again, it's still not good. But all the other ones, um, Y'all Are Liars, The Bars in Fucking Hell. I'll put in The Bars in Fucking Hell. I do want to give this book some props. So I originally picked this book up. I took a picture of it at a Target months ago. The Great Circle was a book that I had on my radar. So when Aaron gave me this particular book, I wasn't actually too upset because actually in the month of June, I had suggested it to be one of the books for my Patreon exclusive reading vlog. So Great Circle by Maggie Shipstead is a book that I can like I want to blame Aaron for making me read. And I guess Aaron is the person who gave me the push, but ultimately this is the book that I wanted to read. Like, this is a thing that I thought I would enjoy. And I do want to give the book credit in that of the Twilight fan fiction that I have seen discussed on the internet, I have not seen anybody call Great Circle for it, because Great Circle is like literary Twilight fan fiction, and Maggie Shipstead should be, applauded, but it was also sometimes really hard to read. So Great Circle is a story that's told in two timelines. In the past timeline, we're following Marion, who is an aviator who led a very tragic life. The book starts off and we're following her parents, this like kind of really beautiful, maybe I don't think she was actually all that wealthy and famous given the fact that she just kind of like disappears. But we're following her. Actually, I think she was supposed to be an aristocrat from like England or something. And her father, who's the ship captain on board this ship that isn't the Titanic, but it's like the Titanic because the boat goes down. And so Marion and her twin brother are abandoned by their mother on this ship, and their father rescues them. But because he was a captain and he did not stay with the ship, he eventually gets sent to prison for some like crimes that the government decides to charge him with. And so Marion and her twin brother are raised in Montana, where they have an indigenous best friend whose name is like Caleb, I want to say. They have an uncle who was like kind of there but very kind of not there, giving Charlie Swan vibes, except their uncle is like an artist. I think he like paints in the barn or something. So they're growing up over there. You hate to see it. And then in the present storyline, we're following a character named Hadley, who was a child, kind of a child actress, whose big claim to fame is the Archangel movies. She's decided that she doesn't want to make Archangel movies anymore. She's kind of over, she's kind of done. And so she steps down. And Hadley, I think, is of the Twilight references, she is the most overt Kristen Stewart stand-in there is. Again, we have the paranormal romance movies that made her a household name. She's dating her co-star. She gets exposed for sleeping with the director of a different project, breaking up with that said co-star. Like, Hadley is Kristen Stewart, who is like desperately trying to be seen as a serious actor and not this girl from these paranormal romance movies. And then Marion, I think, is the much more thinly veiled Bella in this world, but it's still giving Bella Swan. Like it just was. And so Maggie Shipstead gets credit there, but the book itself was actually very boring. The two storylines have almost nothing to do with one another. They don't really feel like they needed to be there except to have this like Kristen Stewart Bella dichotomy and to see an actor try it didn't need to be there. But this Great Circle, it feels a little bit like a Twilight fanfic that had the serial numbers filed off and hasn't been called on it in the same way other Homer fanfics have. But I would not be surprised if in Maggie Shipstead's past she had written this as Edward, Bella, Kristen Stewart, Robert Pattinson. There's also a Stephanie Meyer stand-in who was like jealous of the Kristen Stewart stand-in for being with Robert Pattinson because the Stephanie Meyer imagined this actor in her dreams. It's a lot. So the Litfit girlies are eating it up, but the bar's in hell because the book is boring. Then we have Malice by John Gwynne. The bar's in fucking hell. The bar's in fucking hell. Actually, you know what? All of these have to move up just because of Malice. Like, here's the thing. The bar's in fucking hell, but Malice itself is a very meh book. Like, there's not a whole lot that happens here. There are like six? There's a handful of point of view characters, none of which feel all that great. But my big issue with Malice is that there is no plot for so much of the book. So much of the book, and it's not that, John Gwynne spends that time building characters and building scenery. There's nothing. It's these are just, the book itself is so much dialogue, which I did not expect. In my reading vlog of this past week, I said that there has to be some there has to be a middle ground from what John Gwynne is doing here, where nothing is described, there is no world building, and something like a Robert Jordan or a Brandon Sanderson, where so much of the world is there, or even Sarah J. Maas when she was in her House of Earth and Blood bag, where we would just be walking along and she had to give us explanations for Sunball and the technology and the streets and the city. Like, there has to be some kind of middle ground here, because Malice described nothing. The characters were white bread, has more flavor and density than these characters did. It was giving very paint by numbers. And I know people are like, oh, but it's a debut. It's a debut. I think that Kai is also a debut. I'm not ever going to recommend that like people read this book. I don't think that what it was trying to do, what I was told it was going to do, happened. But I do think that Kai, in as naive as Kai was, there were other characters in this book that I felt had some kind of depth or clarity. And, you know, the book itself also wasn't trying to set up this epic quartet to fantasy. But Malice is supposed to be the foundational building block upon which the series is going to endure and continue. I think there's even a spin-off to this series, and it was just giving very like good versus evil. It wasn't doing anything interesting with this good versus evil identity. It was just giving Bible fanfic with some swords and foolishness. There's like giants. So overall, this book is just not very good, and it doesn't even end with a cliffhanger to get you to read the next one. So I don't understand the enduring nature of this book, or why Fantasy Booktube acts as though this is one of the greatest things that's ever happened. I think just because a book is approachable and is readable doesn't mean that it's as good as some people say it is. The last book I'm going to talk about is Pachinko by Min Jin Lee. She's cute. I gave this book 2 stars, which is, you know, something. I think all of these got some version of a 1 or 1.5 star in my spreadsheet. Pachinko I gave 2, maybe 2.5. Like, it was fine. It was fine. I don't think that Pachinko is a bad book. If you don't know, Pachinko is a story of this family over 4 generations, dealing with the fallout of the Korea. It starts in Korea, where Korea is being occupied by the Japanese, and it eventually ends with the story in Japan and how this Korean family is treated in Japan, and how Koreans in Japan overall have been treated, and what it meant to be a Korean person in Japan before World War II and after World War II, and how some of those like sentiments have like just been a part of the. I think that the best thing that it ever did was talk about the Koreans in Japan and how they have not been treated kindly by the Japanese people, obviously, because, you know, Japan did try to make them I don't say try, they did make Korea a colony. And so that aspect of the book was by far the best. My issue with Pachinko is that I've read, in the year of 2022, I've read some other intergenerational stories, some of them around World War II, some of them set before World War II, some of them again starting. Pachinko starts at the turn of the century in like 1919, and I think that's around the same time of Beasts of a Little Land by Ju Ha Kim. And Beasts of a Little Land is just a better book. It's a better book. Not only because we get to see Japan like really like what they were doing in Korea during colonization. Pachinko, you get like hints of it, you get like whispers of it, but Pachinko I feel is not interested in diving deep into any of the things that it brings up. It's a very surface level book. It's a very introductory book, but it's not going to like really dive deep into the emotions. It's another one of the books like Cleopatra and Frankenstein, where things just kind of happen and we gloss over them, and then the book is over and you're kind of like, oh, I thought we were gonna thought we were gonna dive deep into this. And so I think that in terms of like intergenerational stories, this is a good place to start. But I think that Beasts of a Little Land is a better book. I think that 50 Words for Rain, which is also set in Japan around World War II and after World War II, also following a character who is not fully Japanese. We're following a black Japanese woman in 50 Words for Rain, so you still get to see this character who is not really embraced by Japanese society dealing with Japan at this time in 50 Words for Rain, which I think is a better book. And then Peach Blossom Spring has nothing to do with Korea. That's about Chinese families during World War II and their path into the present. But there they go from China into America. They settle in the American Southwest. It's just a better book. I mean, it's just all of it, and I didn't even like love Peach Blossom Spring that much. but it was a better book than Pachinko. I think that Pachinko is fine. It's a good place to start, but I think that if you are interested in intergenerational stories in a similar time with similar themes and concepts as, you know, the fish out of water narratives being treated differently once you have immigrated, sometimes, well, I will say that Beasts of a Little Land doesn't really touch on immigration a lot because that family just stays in Korea, but it is what it is. there's still, you know, heartache and stuff that happens there. But specifically with 50 Words for Rain and Peach Blossom Spring, like finding a place, what does that mean? Like just all the things that Pachinko wants to talk about, I think that those two books do better and are just better for it. So I think that Erin chose violence. I will give her some credit in that at the time that she sent me the TBR, she had only read, I think she had read Zodiac Academy, Malice, and You Made a Fool of Death with Your Beauty. She had read 3 of them. Since then, I know she has read Cleopatra and Frankenstein, and I think she has also read The Portrait of a Mirror, or maybe not. But I know she read Cleo and Frank for sure. So, you know, she didn't know a lot of what this was, but I also don't, with this, the exception of Great Circle, which I will exclude from any conversation, and Portrait of a Mirror, I don't know what else about these she wanted me to do. Like, I don't know, maybe Pachinko, I'll give her credit for Pachinko, because I was on my, I already owned it. So, like, so Pachinko and Great Circle were ones that I already wanted to read, but everything, and Portrait of a Mirror is a book that just sound, like, you read the description, you're like, yeah, Monty would read that. These other ones, I don't know. I don't know what she was aiming for here, but this is where I'm going to go with. Clearly, there was a lot more in the flop era, because I think I would say all 7 of these are flops. And these were the 2 standouts. These are the 2 that if you wanted to read it, I wouldn't try and talk you out of it. I would just say that if you've already read a lot of stories, I don't know if there's a lot to be gained from Pachinko, except from, you know, how the Japanese treated the Korean people and getting to see some of their stories. So if you want that, this is a good book to pick up. But if you just like intergenerational stories, I'm not sure that even that one is the best, just in terms of intergenerational. But this is the tier ranking. I'm going to pass it back to the regular view and wrap it up. So thanks for watching. Hopefully you had a good time. I'm looking at the raw footage and this is 43 minutes. So this is going to be a long one, but it's fine. Like I said, it's been long awaited. I know people have wanted to see me talk about these things, and I finally have one video where I can direct everybody to. You can let me know, what of these have you read? Have I convinced you to pick them up? Because I know sometimes when I talk bad about a book, the girlies are like, wait, I love that. So if I convinced you to read any of these books that I thought was hot garbage, you can let me know. But with all of that out of the way, I'm going to say peace out. I'll see you again soon in another video. But until then, and until next time, bye.